first of all, we don't know exactly what their goals are. We can hypothesize what their goals are. As you know, I've long hypothesized that their goals are to capture about 40% of Ukrainian territory. They already control 4 oblasts and Crimea. And I think they'll try to take at least 4 more oblasts and end up controlling, about 45% of Ukrainian territory, and they'll incorporate that into Russia. They'll annex that territory. And then they also will want to go to great lengths to make sure that Ukraine is a dysfunctional rump state. And of course, whether or not they can capture all of that territory depends on what happens on the battlefield. And all the evidence at this point in time, coupled with the fact that Donald Trump is now in the White House and does not have much interest in continuing to support Ukraine, tells me that the Russians will win this war and be able to conquer considerably more territory than they now control. So the Russians are in the driver's seat, and there's just not much we can do to stop them.
John Mearsheimer's analysis offers a sobering yet calculated perspective on the trajectory of the Ukraine conflict, especially in light of Donald Trump's recent return to the White House. Let's unpack his remarks and explore what they mean for Ukraine, Russia, the West, and the global order. At the heart of Russia's ambitions lies the pursuit of territorial and political dominance in Ukraine. Mearsheimer's hypothesis, that Russia seeks to annex roughly 40 to 45% of Ukraine, aligns with Moscow's long-standing objective of preventing Ukraine from becoming a Western-aligned state. The regions Russia currently controls, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Crimea, form a strategic belt that provides critical access to the Black Sea and ensures a buffer zone between Russia and NATO. However, Mearsheimer suggests that Moscow's ambitions extend beyond these areas. By targeting additional oblasts, Russia aims to expand its territorial grip and solidify its control over key industrial and agricultural resources. But territorial gains are just one part of the equation. The second, perhaps more sinister, objective is to ensure that whatever remains of Ukraine is a dysfunctional rump state. A weakened Ukraine would lack the political stability, economic resources, and military capacity to threaten Russia's security or act as a NATO outpost. This dual strategy, expansion and destabilization, underscores the Kremlin's desire to reshape Eastern Europe's geopolitical landscape in its favor. Mearsheimer highlights a critical factor. The outcome of this conflict will ultimately depend on what happens on the battlefield. And right now, the momentum appears to be with Russia. Despite initial setbacks, the Russian military has adapted, leveraging its numerical and material advantages to consolidate its positions. Ukraine, on the other hand, has faced mounting challenges. The much-heralded counteroffensive earlier this year failed to achieve its ambitious objectives, with Ukrainian forces struggling to break through heavily fortified Russian defenses. Compounding this is the waning Western support. Mearsheimer's observation that Donald Trump's presidency signals a shift in U.S. policy is a game-changer. Without the robust financial and military backing of the United States, Ukraine's capacity to resist Russian advances diminishes significantly. Furthermore, Europe, while more united than ever in its condemnation of Russia, has its own limitations. Economic strain, political divisions, and the energy crisis have left many European nations questioning the sustainability of their support for Ukraine. As the battlefield tilts increasingly in Russia's favor, the prospect of Kyiv regaining lost territory becomes increasingly unlikely. Donald Trump's return to the White House introduces a new dynamic. Trump has been vocal about his skepticism of U.S. involvement in Ukraine, arguing that the conflict is not a core American interest. Mearsheimer suggests that Trump's disengagement from Ukraine will embolden Russia. Without the threat of U.S. intervention, Moscow has more freedom to pursue its objectives. This policy shift also puts pressure on European nations, many of which have relied on American leadership in coordinating aid to Ukraine. The implications of Trump's presidency go beyond Ukraine. His stance challenges the post-Cold War consensus that the United States should act as the global enforcer of liberal democracy. Instead, Trump's America First approach prioritizes domestic concerns over international conflicts, signaling a broader retreat from the global stage. If Mearsheimer's predictions come true, Ukraine faces a grim future. The loss of additional territory would not only deal a devastating blow to its sovereignty, but also exacerbate its already dire economic and humanitarian crises. Since the start of the war, millions of Ukrainians have been displaced, and entire cities have been reduced to rubble. Further Russian advances would deepen this suffering, creating a new wave of refugees and compounding the challenges of rebuilding. Politically, a fragmented Ukraine would struggle to maintain stability. Internal divisions, exacerbated by the trauma of war, could lead to prolonged periods of unrest. Internationally, Ukraine's diminished stature would make it less attractive to Western institutions, undermining its aspirations of joining NATO or the European Union. The potential success of Russia's campaign has far-reaching implications. For NATO, it represents a significant failure. The alliance's inability to deter Russian aggression raises questions about its effectiveness and credibility, particularly in the eyes of Eastern European members who feel directly threatened by Moscow. For Europe, the war exposes deep divisions. While countries like Poland and the Baltic states have taken a hardline stance against Russia, others, such as Hungary and even Germany, have shown reluctance to fully commit to the fight. This fragmentation weakens the collective Western response and plays into Russia's hands. Globally, a Russian victory in Ukraine could set a dangerous precedent. It would signal to other revisionist powers, like China, that territorial expansion can be achieved with limited consequences. This could embolden Beijing in its ambitions toward Taiwan, further destabilizing the international order. Mearsheimer's assertion that there's just not much we can do to stop that underscores the West's constrained position. Sanctions, while damaging to Russia's economy, have not achieved their intended effect of forcing Moscow to withdraw. Meanwhile, the flow of Western arms to Ukraine, though significant, has been insufficient to turn the tide of the war. The West faces a difficult choice: continue pouring resources into a conflict with no clear end in sight, or accept a negotiated settlement that leaves Russia with substantial territorial gains. Either option carries significant risks and trade-offs. As the war in Ukraine unfolds, it becomes increasingly clear that we are witnessing a profound shift in the global balance of power. Russia's resurgence, coupled with the West's inability to contain it, signals the end of the unipolar moment that emerged after the Cold War. For Ukraine, this new reality is devastating. For the West, it is a wake-up call to reassess its strategies and priorities. And for Russia, it is an opportunity to reassert itself as a great power on the world stage. John Mearsheimer's analysis provides a sobering reminder of the stakes involved in the Ukraine conflict. As the battlefield dynamics evolve and geopolitical calculations shift, the world must grapple with the implications of a Russian victory. The question is not just what happens to Ukraine, but what kind of world emerges in the aftermath of this war. Will the international order adapt to accommodate new realities, or will it fracture under the weight of competing interests and ambitions? Only time will tell, but one thing is clear: the decisions made in the coming months will shape the course of history for years to come. According to John Mearsheimer, first of all, we don't know exactly what their goals are. We can hypothesize what their goals are. As you know, I've long hypothesized that their goals are to capture about 40% of Ukrainian territory. They already control 4 oblasts in Crimea, and I think they'll try to take at least 4 more oblasts and end up controlling about 40 to 45% of Ukrainian territory. They'll incorporate that into Russia. They'll annex that territory. They'll also want to go to great lengths to ensure that Ukraine is a dysfunctional rump state. Of course, whether or not they can capture all that territory depends on what happens on the battlefield. All the evidence at this point in time, coupled with the fact that Donald Trump is now in the White House and does not have much interest in continuing to support Ukraine, tells me that the Russians will win this war and be able to conquer considerably more territory than they now control. The Russians are in the driver's seat, and there's just not much we can do to stop them. Thanks for watching.